My name is Caitlin Morse. I'm 32, and I work as a financial analyst for a supply chain distribution company in Nashville, Tennessee. The evening my brother's wedding ended, he found me in the hotel lobby, still in his tux, a glass of champagne tilted toward me like a toast, and said, "Kate, we really couldn't have done this without you." I smiled and meant it. I had spent 4 months coordinating every vendor, every room block, every dietary restriction, and every airport shuttle. What I did not know, standing there in that lobby while the string quartet finished its last set in the ballroom above us, was that his thank you had been timed. 3 bank alerts had landed on my phone during the reception. 3 charges from an account I had not actively used in nearly 4 years. The combined total was $19,400. None of it had my authorization. None of it had my name on an approval I had ever given. What it did have was someone who knew exactly which account to look in and exactly when to use it. Before I explain how a forgotten joint checking account ended my relationship with my brother, his wife, and most of my immediate family, I want to ask you something. If someone accessed an old account you had half forgotten, not your main card, not the savings you check every morning, but something dormant and quiet that you had meant to close and never did, would you have caught it in time? I almost didn't. That is not an accident. That is a plan. My older brother Nolan and I grew up in Clarksville, about 45 minutes north of Nashville. Our mother Roberta raised us largely on her own after our father left when I was 9 and Nolan was 12. She worked hospital administration for most of our childhood, which meant she was careful with money in ways that made her proud and made Nolan restless. By the time we were adults, Nolan had developed a particular talent for looking at other people's stability and mistaking it for availability. When Nolan was 28, he and I shared an apartment in East Nashville for 3 years. We split rent through a joint Truist account. We each deposited our share on the first of the month. The rent drafted out automatically, and we used the small remaining balance for utilities and groceries. When Nolan met his girlfriend Sasha and they moved in together, I assumed we would close the account. I called the bank, removed the automatic draft, and told Nolan to go in and handle his side. He said he would. I stopped monitoring it because I believed him. He did not close it. I discovered this later, but I am getting ahead of myself. Nolan proposed 2 winters ago. They got engaged in January, set the date for October, and chose Savannah, Georgia, because Sasha had always imagined it as the most romantic city in the country. The ceremony would be in Forsyth Park. The reception would be on a rooftop venue near the river. 80 guests, a vintage trolley, a 4-piece band, a photo booth, and a custom cocktail menu. Sasha sent me a color-coded spreadsheet in February with a line for every vendor, every timeline, and every cost estimate. The grand total was $41,000. Their combined budget was $28,000. That gap was introduced to me gently, over several conversations, as something I might help bridge. Nolan never asked directly. He used phrases like, "You're so good with numbers, Kate," and "Sasha really trusts your judgment on this stuff," and eventually, "You know how much this day means to her." Sasha used a different approach. She sent me links to wedding planning articles about how the maid of honor's role had evolved to include coordination support. She asked if I would take point on vendor communications, since I worked with contracts professionally and knew how to read the fine print. I agreed to help with logistics. I made it clear, once and in writing over text, that I was not financing any portion of the wedding. Nolan said he understood. Sasha said, of course, absolutely. My mother Roberta said I was making something simple into something complicated. Over the following 2 months, the requests came in units small enough to feel manageable. Could I float the deposit on the trolley company because their card had a temporary hold? They would send a Zelle transfer by Friday. Could I prepay the floral consultation fee, just $200? Because Sasha's bank flagged out-of-state charges. The Friday transfer never came. I stopped floating deposits after the second one. I asked for written confirmation before anything connected to my accounts. Sasha called this treating a family celebration like a vendor negotiation. Nolan told Roberta I was being difficult. What nobody mentioned across all those conversations was the Truist account. 6 weeks before the wedding, Sasha texted me a question I did not think much about at the time. She asked whether the old Nashville account was still active. I said I thought so, that I kept meaning to close it, and that there was probably a small balance left over. She wrote back a thumbs up and nothing else. I made a note to call the bank and forgot about it within the hour. I was managing vendor confirmations for the trolley, the florist, the caterer, and the hotel room block. I did not have space in my brain for a dormant joint account with what I assumed was $40 or $50 sitting in it. Here is what I did not know. Over the 3 years since Nolan and I had stopped sharing that apartment, I had made occasional direct deposits into that account without realizing it. A payroll routing error at a previous employer, a refund sent to an old account number I had not updated, small amounts individually that I had written off as minor discrepancies. Together, those amounts had accumulated. The actual balance in the Truist account, when Sasha checked it through Nolan's online access in early September, was $300. I found this out in October, standing outside the hotel with my shoes in my hand and 3 notifications on my phone. The first charge was $8,200. The description read, Hazel and Fern Events, Reception Enhancement Package. The second was $7,600. Everwood Photography, Full Day Luxury Documentation. The third was $3,600. Casa Paloma Tulum Villa Deposit. The timestamp on all 3 was 4:47 p.m. The ceremony had started at 4. I had been seated in the front row watching my brother get married. I stood on that sidewalk outside the Andaz Hotel in Savannah at 9:22 at night and called Truist's customer line. The representative confirmed that all 3 transactions had processed that afternoon. The account was still jointly held under both Nolan's and my name. The charges were authorized through Nolan's online access. I asked for the account to be frozen immediately, and a dispute opened on all 3 charges. The representative noted that because the account was jointly held, the dispute process would require investigation into whether either account holder had consented. I told her I had not. She froze the account and opened the case. My brother called me at 9:41. He did not ask how I was. He asked why the vendor payments had failed. I told him I had disputed them. He said, Kate, that was the joint account. I didn't take anything that wasn't half mine. I said half of the account is not the same as all of the account. He was quiet for a moment. Then he said I was overreacting to a formality. I hung up. Sasha sent a text at 10:08 p.m. It was 3 paragraphs long. The summary was this. She and Nolan had agreed that using the joint account was acceptable because I had never formally closed it, because I had told her it was probably still active, and because the amounts represented a reasonable contribution to a wedding I had helped plan. She added that I had been listed in the wedding program as a coordinator, and that my name was on the thank you speech Nolan had delivered at the reception. This, she wrote, made my involvement a matter of public record. I read the text twice, then I opened my email. During the planning process, Sasha had asked for access to a forwarding alias I used for vendor communications, Caitlin.Morse-Avens, so she could send confirmations on my behalf while I was in work meetings. I had shared the login to that subdomain only, not my primary account. I pulled up the forwarding history. Between August 14th and October 3rd, Sasha had used that alias to send 19 emails to vendors. 3 of those emails, to the reception venue, the photographer, and the Tulum Villa, contained what appeared to be payment authorizations signed with my name. The wording was formal. It referenced my role as event coordinator and financial liaison. The phrase, please process as discussed and charge accordingly, appeared in all 3. I had not written any of them. I compared the language to emails I had actually sent during the planning process. My emails were shorter. I used specific dates. I wrote hi and not greetings. I never referred to myself as a financial liaison. The forged emails used a phrase that appeared repeatedly in Sasha's own texts to me. We want everything handled seamlessly. I had never written that phrase in my life. I forwarded the full chain to myself, downloaded the access logs for the alias, and screenshotted every vendor thread. Then I called my cousin Iris, who had been a bridesmaid. Iris picked up before the second ring. She asked whether I was okay. I asked her what she had heard from the reception. She said Nolan's toast had mentioned that I had upgraded the celebration as a wedding gift. Several guests had come up to her afterward to say how generous I was. One of Sasha's aunts told her it was the most thoughtful thing she had ever seen a sibling do. I told Iris what the bank alert said. There was a long silence on the line. Then Iris said, Kate, she did something like this to me. 3 months before the wedding, Sasha had called Iris asking for an $800 venue deposit hold because the Forsyth Park permit allegedly required a credit card guarantee from a Georgia-based contact. Iris did not live in Georgia. but Sasha said the address on the application just needed to be in-state and asked if Iris would transfer the amount temporarily. Iris sent the $800 directly. The permit, Iris later discovered, had been paid through the wedding venue's standard booking process weeks earlier. There was no second charge. The money was never returned. When Iris asked about it, Sasha said she assumed Nolan had already sent it back, and there must have been a miscommunication. Iris had kept every message. She forwarded them to me that night. I flew home to Nashville on Sunday morning. On Monday, I met with my attorney, Miss Yoon, who specialized in civil financial disputes. I brought the bank freeze confirmation, the full email chain from the alias, the access log timestamps, the 3 fraudulent authorization emails, Iris's messages, and a written timeline of every conversation in which I had explicitly stated I was not financing the wedding. Ms. Yuen reviewed the materials for 40 minutes without speaking. When she looked up, she said the case was clearer than most she saw. The charges had been made without my consent from an account that should have been closed. The forged authorization emails were a separate and more serious problem. Using a shared email alias to send financial authorizations I had not written was identity fraud, regardless of the joint account question. And the $800 taken from Iris under a false pretense established a pattern. She told me not to communicate with Nolan or Sasha except in writing. I sent Nolan one text that evening. It read, "I have retained an attorney regarding the unauthorized charges. Please communicate through counsel going forward." He called 11 times between 8 p.m. and midnight. I did not answer. The wedding coordinator, Heather, reached out on Wednesday. She had received an inquiry from the photographer's billing department and her name had come up in the bank's review. She was apologetic and clearly unsettled. She told me the authorization emails she had received looked entirely professional and came from what appeared to be my address. She had assumed they were genuine. She said she had a complete record of every email, invoice, and timestamp, and that she was willing to speak on record. Heather's records revealed something I had not been able to see from my end. The authorization email to the reception venue had been sent at 2:13 p.m. on a Wednesday, while I was in a client call logged in my company's communication system from 2 to 3:45 that afternoon. The photographer's authorization had been sent on a Saturday morning when I was checked in at a yoga studio 2 miles from my apartment, according to the studio's attendance record. None of the timestamps matched times when I could have been at a keyboard sending vendor approvals. All of them matched times when Sasha, based on her own social media posts, had been at home. I gave the access logs and Heather's records to Ms. Yoon. She filed the civil complaint the following Friday. Roberta called 2 weeks later. She sounded different, quieter, like she was choosing each word before it left her mouth. She asked if I would sit down with the whole family, not to resolve anything legally, just to talk. She said she had been thinking about the $800 and the emails, and things she had not let herself look at directly. I agreed on 2 conditions. I would bring documentation, and I would leave at the first sign the conversation was meant to talk me out of the legal process. She accepted. The dinner was at Roberta's house in Clarksville on a Sunday in November. Iris came. Nolan and Sasha arrived separately, which I noted without comment. Nolan had lost weight. Sasha did not look at me when she walked in. Nolan spoke first. He said he was sorry things had gotten to this point. He said he had believed Sasha when she told him the account authorization was something we had informally agreed to. He said he had not read the vendor emails himself. I asked him directly, did he know before the wedding that the Truist account still had over $24,000 in it? He looked at the table. He said Sasha had mentioned there was a balance. I asked whether he had ever told me that. He said no. I asked whether he had ever asked me if I consented to using it. Another pause. He said he had assumed it was implied because the account was still open. I opened my laptop. Heather joined by video. She introduced herself, described the booking process from the beginning, read the authorization emails aloud, and showed the timestamps next to my documented whereabouts. The room was quiet enough to hear the refrigerator running in the kitchen. Sasha said the timestamps could be wrong. Iris set her phone on the table. She had pulled up an Instagram post Sasha had shared the morning of the photographer authorization, a coffee cup on her kitchen counter, posted at 10:42 a.m. The authorization email to the photographer had been sent at 10:38 a.m. Nobody answered that. I told Nolan, "You said you thought it was implied. Here is what was actually implied." Sasha checked the account balance 6 weeks before the wedding. She used a shared login to send emails in my name. She took money from Iris under a false story about a permit, and she timed the charges to go through while I was watching you get married. None of that is an implication. That is a plan. Nolan put his hands over his face. He did not defend Sasha. Sasha said I was trying to destroy their marriage. I told her I had not been inside their marriage long enough to destroy it. Roberta, who had not spoken since we sat down, looked at Sasha and said quietly, "I want to hear you explain the emails." Sasha gathered her bag, said she needed air, and walked outside. She did not come back in. The civil case moved at the pace civil cases move. Nolan retained his own attorney, separate from Sasha's. Ms. Yuen told me that was notable. When spouses in a joint dispute hire separate counsel, it usually means their accounts of events have stopped matching. The bank investigation closed with a finding that the charges were unauthorized by me. The fraudulent authorization emails fell under a separate civil identity fraud claim. Truist issued a provisional credit for the full $19,400 while the case proceeded. Nolan accepted a settlement in January. Full repayment of $19,400, all messages related to the wedding finances, and a written statement confirming I had not authorized the charges. He paid in 2 installments. He included, without being asked, a handwritten note. It was 4 sentences. He said he was sorry he had not asked directly. He said he had told himself the account made things simpler, and had not let himself think about what simpler meant for me. He said he knew that was not enough. He was right. But it was the first honest thing he had said to me in months, and I kept it. Sasha's case settled in the spring. Her attorney had tried to reduce the claim to Iris's $800, calling the vendor authorizations a shared misunderstanding. The photography company and the venue both submitted documentation confirming they had relied on what appeared to be written approvals from me. The judge required Sasha to repay the vendor amounts and Iris's $800, complete a diversion program for financial fraud, and have no contact with me. She accepted rather than go to full trial. Roberta asked to have lunch with me in February, just the 2 of us. She did not try to make me forgive Nolan faster. She did not mention Sasha at all. She ordered a chicken sandwich and asked about my job and told me about a ceramics class she had started on Thursday evening. Before we left, she said she had not understood, when we were growing up, how much it mattered to say out loud that something was wrong. Not to manage it, not to smooth it over, but to actually say it clearly. She said she thought she had taught Nolan and me to stay quiet because she had always stayed quiet, and she was sorry for the part of that she had passed on. I am not sure exactly what she was apologizing for, but I heard it, and I wrote it down later, because I wanted to remember what it sounded like when someone in my family said a true thing without being asked. I closed the Truist account the week after the family dinner. The remaining balance was transferred to a new individual account in my name only. I updated every automatic deposit and direct routing number I had. I changed the email alias password and removed all shared access. I froze my credit, added alerts on every account, and revised my emergency contacts. I did not block Nolan immediately. I waited until the settlement was complete, then sent him one message. I told him I was not refusing contact permanently, but that I needed more time than he was probably comfortable with. He read it and did not reply, which was the right call. I have not spoken to Sasha since she walked out of my mother's dining room in November. People ask me sometimes whether I feel guilty, whether the legal process was worth what it cost the family. I understand why they ask. We are raised to believe that family forgiveness is a moral obligation, that the cost of keeping peace is always less than the cost of demanding accountability. We are taught that the generous thing is to let it go, especially when the person who took from us is someone we love. But here is what I have come to understand. Generosity is a choice made with full information and a clear mind. What happened at that wedding was not me choosing to give. It was someone choosing to take, quietly, carefully on a day I would be too overwhelmed and too happy to notice. A forgotten account is not a gift. A shared login is not a power of attorney. And the fact that I could afford the loss was not, and has never been, permission to cause it. The night of the wedding, when my brother stood in the lobby and told me we couldn't have done it without me, he was telling the truth in a way neither of us fully understood yet. They really could not have done it without me. Without my name, my account, my years of trust, and my careful habit of never making scenes at family events. They had built a plan around all of those things. What they had not counted on was that the same person who kept meticulous records, read every contract, and flagged financial discrepancies for a living would not stop doing that on her brother's wedding night. The account is closed, the alerts are on, and the next time someone asks whether a forgotten account is still accessible, I will answer them exactly as honestly as they deserve, which is not at all.